loneliness is like hunger. It's like thirst. I have this saying of like solitude is so sacred, and if you never learn how to be alone, you'll always be dependent on others. If you're going to be with someone for the rest of your life, if you meet them at 30, there's a chance you spend 50, 60 years with them. And you might not get this time in your 20s, being young, being maybe untethered, to make those really, really core social relationships that are going to last a lifetime.
Yeah, the privilege point is definitely interesting. Maybe we can get into it a bit more later, but just to stick on the idea of choice for the moment, for those who have it, I feel like the kind of other aspect of choice, and maybe this is what brings about the quarter life crisis a lot, is that in having so many different paths, people used to converge a lot more, staying in whatever village you were, with friends and everything. And I think whether you see your friends a lot or not, the ability to have that choice and to go down different paths means you can often end up being a lot more lonely. And I don't know if you think that's maybe one of the biggest things that people are struggling with as a result of choice overload and globalization and all those other things.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, did you grow up in Oxford, Ollie, or are you from a different part of the UK?
I'm from, I don't know how well you know the UK. I'm kind of like an hour out of London, a different part to Oxford, basically. Just countryside, basically.
Yeah. And Lucas, you said you're from Malta, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure when you guys first moved to Oxford, it would have been terrifying. And I'm sure that you've probably lost contact with a lot of people you knew before I don't know if it's a 4-year degree over there. I'm assuming it is 4 years.
Mine's 3, Ollie's is 4.
Okay. And this is what I think. It would have felt really, really lonely to begin with. And everyone like experiences that at some point, maybe even 2 years in, probably feeling lonely for you now, Lucas, like about to be in this transition point. But I think that in that point is where you actually are able to readjust the relationships that you have in your life. And it's so funny that you bring this up, because I was watching this program, like I'm an 80-year-old woman. I was watching this TV show called Last Stop Larimer, which is based in Australia. And it's about this town. And there's only 11 people there. 11. And one of them ends up being murdered. It's this whole drama. It's a true story. And these people have known each other for ages. And I do feel the attraction of like, oh, I want to know the same people for my whole life. And we've grown up together and it's beautiful and it's gorgeous. And these people were like, had so much friction. It's like, I think it's a grass is greenest in like mentality, where it's like, oh, the good old days were so great. And then, at the time people were probably like, oh, I wish I could just escape my small town. That's probably why a lot of people a lot of younger people did move for more opportunity. But definitely like loneliness in this day and age, like what did the World Health Organization say? It's like almost an epidemic, like an emotional and like a mental affliction becoming an epidemic that we know has like long-term health consequences, and not just mental health, like physical health as well. Like it's huge. It's huge. It's so harmful.
Yeah, I think it obviously has so many negative consequences, but something that I found really interesting in your kind of approach to it, which I think is kind of the unique way of looking at it, because most people go, oh, well, I'm lonely. Okay, how can I embrace connection, see friends more, this and that? But you say that it's not necessarily something to run from, and that it can actually tell us something. Can you tell us a little bit more about that maybe?
Yeah, it's so funny. I was just writing something about this, and I know I said it was horrible, but it's a horrible feeling. But actually, loneliness is like hunger. It's like thirst. Like all it is actually a social cue. It's not a social cue, like an evolutionary cue. Like it's a cue of like, there is this thing that I really, really need. I need food. I need water. I need shelter. I need connection. And all that loneliness is a little alarm bell in your head saying time to reach out, time to reconnect, time to maybe find new friends. And I actually think that's really, really valuable to be in tune with that. The other reason it's really valuable is when you start to notice that you feel lonely, even when you're around people. It's like, something about my need isn't being fulfilled here. Because if it was merely the being surrounded by people cured loneliness, like you go to a shopping center and you'd feel great. No, it's like the emotional depth of certain connections and the intimacy and the vulnerability. And so I think that loneliness in that way is actually a really great way to assess your life and to assess it's like, I don't really know how to explain this, but it's kind of like, yeah, it's like, I don't know if you guys have like carbon monoxide detectors. I know this is a really strange analogy, but it's like, that's what loneliness is for like your body. It's like, okay, there is something about the situation in my life that like isn't making me happy. And also it's like, I hate when people are like, well, it's normal, so why should you fear it? It's like, well, death is normal. Illness is normal. Like, it's still scary, but it's also kind of inevitable. So you have to have you have to find a way to make loneliness fit in your life and in your mind in a way that feels appropriate and like healthy, if that makes sense.
There's a bit of a balance that needs to be struck, because there are obviously people who have this chronic loneliness, there are people, of course, who are very little friends, who spend every weekend at home alone. And then in that case, I think it can be really detrimental to mental health and can lead people down really dark paths. While on the flip side, you've got people who are in general have good circle of friends, good support network, but might feel occasional loneliness, in which case that's a good breeding ground for growth. And from there, I suppose the question is how we can cultivate a healthy habit of spending time alone and how we can find that balance.
I really like that you made that point, actually. I have this saying of like, solitude is so sacred, and if you never learn how to be alone, you'll always be dependent on others. And I think that when you start to apply that to your life, it makes so much sense, right? And there was this really interesting paper I was reading the other day, particularly about people who feel loneliness and their tendency to stay in bad relationships. And I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory, but people who are like, I'm afraid of being alone, it's like, will often also be the people who are like, I just spent 4 years with someone that I didn't even like because I was so terrified of what it would mean to have to just like experience life without company. So I do think that like solitude and a respect for solitude is a muscle that you can strengthen. I had this friend who used to do, what did she call them? Like recharge. I don't know what she called them. Basically the premise was like she would go away for a weekend and spend the entire weekend alone. And I don't know if this is a healthy way of saying it, but I remember this stuck with me, where she was like, I like the fact that I've trained, like, she's like, now I know that I never have to stay in a relationship or stay in a friendship or even stay in a job or in a city just because there are people there that I like. And that makes me a lot more untethered. But she was like, it also means that I am better able to understand like which relationships I actually want and which relationships are truly nourishing, because I'm not just rushing to them for a cure to my loneliness because I'm terrified of it. So yeah, I think it's a good practice to like spend time alone, to find ways to like integrate solitude into your life. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as a weekend, but even like an afternoon.
Want your head and hair to feel cool and clean? Been going to extreme measures to cool your head off? Then get yourself a Manscaped. Don't be like Ollie and take your scalp from zero to hero with the new scalp buffer now. Use the discount code LOVE to get your 20% off.
Yeah, I think the romantic relationship one, particularly for people kind of at our age, often from like 16 onwards, it can be super easy. I've been a little bit guilty of it as well, to just kind of be in a relationship and kind of let it dominate all other relationships and that kind of thing. And part of it is running from loneliness and just always having somebody to speak to, always texting, always being on the phone. And friendships kind of maybe sit often at more of a distance just because there's multiple and they're different.
So true. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, because obviously, everyone has different sets of friends, different commitments. So you can't just sit on the phone with your friend the whole day or text them the whole day. And you can't be like, oh, what? You're picking them over me. Whereas a friendship to a romantic relationship, somebody like your girlfriend could be like, oh, why are you, talking to them? But anyway, on that point, you say friendship is more important than romantic relationships in your 20s, or can be more important. I think a lot of people intuitively maybe wouldn't agree with that. So can you explain your perspective maybe on that?
Yeah, and I get it. Because I used to be someone who was like, no, my 20s are for finding the person I'll marry in my 30s. Duh. And you have to really think like, why do I think that? Because I do think that if you're going to be with someone for the rest of your life, if you meet them at 30, there's a chance you spend 50, 60 years with them. And you might not get this time in your 20s, being young, being maybe untethered, to make those really, really core social relationships that are going to last a lifetime. And here is something that I've noticed. 30 and up, like, people are always going to, I guess, want to find a romantic partner, right? There is always a drive there. There is always an opportunity. If someone is single, like, they're always going to have time to be single and to date you because they don't have a partner. But the thing that does tend to be a lesser priority, like a little bit later on, is friendship, right? And I think that's where people really rely on earlier memories and earlier experiences to really make up for it. I also just have to say, like, once you find, if your whole thing is like a pursuit of a relationship, once you get it, you realize that it can still be incredibly lonely. And like, that's speaking from experience, where it was like, oh my God, I just remember when I was younger, maybe like 4 years ago, I was like, oh no, like, all my friends have these partners. Like, that's something that I want. And then you get there and you're like, okay, well, actually, one person is not all that a life needs. Like, you need community. Like, we are communal creatures. And so I do think that, like, this is such an opportunity in your 20s when everyone's kind of on the same page, kind of in the same boat. Most of us don't have kids. Most of us, like, especially in our early 20s, most of us don't have these huge family commitments, to actually just like make great friends. Hopefully that's a good justification. Hopefully I've convinced some people to stop like chasing after situationships or whatever.
I think it is a good justification. I think it's a fine line, again, as many of these things seem to be, in that I feel like there does come a point where, at least in my experience, from what I've observed, that having romantic relationships can be really beneficial if it's the right person. But at the same time, if friendships go to the wayside because of a romantic relationship, it can be actually quite detrimental to a person's ability to grow into a well-rounded person, because you've only got one perspective. It's like, I've just come up with this analogy now, but it's like consuming just one media source, right? You always get the same perspective. Whereas if you've got lots of different friends and maybe different circles, you've got lots of different ways of viewing the world. And in that sense, I think a relationship should perhaps be one out of many human relationships, rather than the one that it's, from in a meta sense, one relationship above all others.
I love that. And have you heard this question? This kind of reminds me of this question of like, would you rather meet the love of your life now, but never make any more good friends? Or would you rather 20 amazing, great friends who last the rest of your life and to never find love? There is no right answer to that, but it's interesting to see how people's values align and like what they intuitively choose, because mine is intuitively like friendship for sure. But then other people like, and I'm saying this as someone who has a long-term like partner who like we live together, like, his is like, oh no, I'd rather have like you. And I'm like, yeah, of course I want to have you. But like, they didn't have, I'm like, oh no, this isn't me breaking up with you in like a weird philosophical question way. That's so cruel. But it's kind of like, yeah, but if I could have you or 20 friends and I could only choose one, like, I'm really sorry. I'd rather have you as a friend, if you know what I mean. Like, So it's interesting to see like how you answer that intuitively, like impulsive, like from an impulse position.
I think for me, I don't know. In one sense, I feel like I've been pretty lucky with my friends so far. And I feel like as much as I'd love obviously to have 20 more great friends, I could be fine with the friends I have. So maybe
found a way around it.
I have enough friends. I always say that.
Yeah. So maybe I'd probably lean to relationship. I don't know. What would you say, Lucas?
I think it's a tricky one. I was lucky enough in that my girlfriend at the moment, we were friends for 2 years beforehand. So I've kind of experienced both with her. And I think that's an interesting way to set up the relationship, in that I think a lot of healthy relationships have, when partners are together, they're also friends. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a tricky one, because one, I think, common issue that people face is that when they're in relationships, they often, as I said before, then tend to meet their friends less. And one non-negotiable piece of advice that you have or you have given is that you should schedule in at least 2 to 3 times a week. You should schedule in times to see your friends. How do you see value being gained from that, and why do you think it's important?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know when I gave that piece of advice, guys. I love that you've done your research and I'm like, I said that? That's actually pretty good advice. The value that I see in that is that not only does it allow you to maintain, this is something that I believe so deeply and that I've really come to understand more recently is like, you are nothing without community. Like there are so many issues in society where it's like one of the antidotes of many would be to improve like a sense of community, loneliness being one of them, mental health also being another, like those two coming in separately. And so I just think that having being deliberate about your friendships is also important. And that is something that I see people really kind of fall off on where they're like, yeah. And I'm not calling you out. I'm like, I also, and sometimes I have enough friends, but you're like, yeah, I've got my friends. We're always going to be friends. I think we're probably all lucky in that. Like I've had friends for 10, some of them 15 years where I'm like, yeah, you're a sibling, right? But when you kind of get to that level of comfort, sometimes it becomes very low effort and that doesn't always lead to the best outcome. So firstly, I think it's great for maintaining relationship. Secondly, I just genuinely think that it keeps your kind of baseline level of needed social connection at a healthy level. Because if you ever noticed you go through periods where you're not seeing people and then suddenly it's like a shift, a permanent shift. And I noticed this when I finished uni, a few years back, where I finished and then I went from seeing people every day and then I went from seeing people not that often. And now if I was to go back into that environment where I was seeing people every day, I'd be exhausted. Doesn't mean that I don't need that connection. So I think it's good for maintaining a level of a baseline level of necessary connection and socialization that keeps you healthy. Also, it's just kind of fun. I love seeing my friends. One of my best friends actually, and this has been one of the reasons, sorry guys, I'm rambling, but I love talking about her. This has been one of the reasons why I've been really waking up to this community health element is because one of my best friends lives 2 doors down from me. And it is the best thing that has happened for my health this year, being okay, I'm not in this distant state from everyone that I love. And one of my friends is launching this website / app / I don't know, an app, I guess. I don't even know what it is. A company where they help friendship groups and groups of friends find properties near each other. And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea because it's just I don't know. I think that would just be so fulfilling. Just going on a rant. My new thing is this community thing, and everyone's always like, okay, but I like it.
Well, if it comes out, let us know. I'd love to use it. I can't lie. It could be fun. But
if it launches in the UK, I'll let you know. Actually, it's really cool.
Yeah, but you mentioned also being at uni and seeing people 24/7. The flip side of that often, compared to needing to see friends more and having that communal aspect, is often it can be quite a lot, and you're saying yes to everything that happens around you. What would your advice be for learning to set boundaries with friends and the right way to go about doing it without upsetting anyone or making it seem like you don't want to spend time with them and so on?
Are you still at in a college, or are you at a share house, or I don't know how it works in the UK, to be honest?
Yeah, it's different from uni to uni. For us, basically, we have, in Oxford, you have, I think it's 42 or something, different colleges, and they kind of act like little houses. You have a set of professors. So for example, if you do philosophy at my college, you'll have a specific professor compared to somebody who does it at a different college, and then everyone lives together. You have a hall and all that kind of thing. So there's a very much communal aspect where we are, but often there's just, most UK unis is just, you live in a uni house a bit away from campus and you have your friends that you live in a uni house with, and that's mostly it. And then sports teams and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's crazy. Oxford has 42 economics professors, like 42 politics professors. God, I know who's hiring them.
Some of them are smaller and have less, but yeah,
that's
it depends.
crazy. That's so interesting. I didn't know that. In Australia, like I remember, and I think this is really common in the US as well, it's like you live on, actually in Australia, if you don't like go to uni in your state, which is not as common as I think, or in like your town, I guess, you go to like these huge residential halls. And there is like 500 people living there. That is 500 people who are the same age as you, who care about probably the same things as you, who all want to get on the piss with you, who like all want to like go and party and like kind of want to like sleep together. And it's just like this intense environment. And you're right, it gets so much. And I remember like moving out of my college to a share house and I was like, I need to get out of here. Like this is too much, because this is a study I always pull up. It's by Robin Dunbar. Robin Dunbar is like my favorite psychology professor, psychology researcher ever. He's done so much work on like gossip, on friendship. And he was the one who was like, we max out at 150 people in our community connections, whatever, we're maxed out. And past that point, like you're not getting the same quality. And so there is a need to kind of, and also I think it was something like you can really only have like 5 close friends, and every relationship takes effort to upkeep. So I think when it comes to like setting boundaries, a good friend will understand when you need space. And it's not like the kind of space that is the end of the relationship. It's just like, I need a night in. I need to not come to that. And I remember being like in uni, even in like when I was younger and as like a teenager, being like, expressing needs to friendships is such like a catalyst for conflict. And the older you get, the more you realize and the more you practice this, confrontation, the more you practice boundary setting. And you realize that the people who really care about you are probably also feeling similar to you, because they are more, aligned with you in like a character sense. And you realize that if someone isn't going to respect that need to like take a night off, to maybe like take a step back, that relationship is probably not going to thrive much longer anyways. So you kind of cut your losses at a point, I think. It's a bit of a learning process. I don't really have many tips for it. I guess because I don't remember doing anything deliberately, I have to think about it.
Do you tend to take like quite a direct communication style and kind of state it? Because I think often now a lot of like mental health and therapeutic language and stuff has come into the mainstream. And that's why even talking about setting boundaries is even a thing. Because I think like 20 years ago, you wouldn't even talk about it like that. I don't think you would even say that. So I guess my kind of question is, how direct are you? And do you phrase it in those terms, or do you just take it a bit more chill? I.e., are you like, I'm setting a boundary, I need to spend tonight alone? Or is it just like, oh, I'd rather have a night in,
I think that I would be like, I use the boundary speak, because like therapy speak is huge nowadays. And sometimes I think it's really weaponized, where it's like, yeah, I'm setting a boundary that I don't want you to see that person anymore. It's like, that's not a boundary. That's a demand. Let's get that clear. So I think that also sometimes I shy away from like using that language, because I'm like, people get icky about it. I feel like we've kind of, like the horseshoe theory, like you go so far around that you actually end up at the same point. It's like I think we're kind of getting there. Or it's like the people who really do need boundaries set with them now know how to use that term back. So I normally am just very much like, I'm going to express a need and I'm going to express what I would like. And if you push me on it, then I'm going to say, no, that's a boundary for me. Because normally I find that if expressing like, hey, this is what I would like for me, because obviously you can't control what someone else does, but you saying, well, I want to step back from these kind of conversations, like you gossiping about people. I don't want to be involved in that. I don't really want to do drugs with you guys anymore. Like whatever it is, it's like express what you want. And then if they push you, then you say that's a boundary. And I think people are really receptive to that. Loneliness is like hunger. All it is actually a social cue. I need connection. And all that loneliness is a little alarm bell in your head saying, time to reach out, time to reconnect, time to maybe find new friends.
Jemma Sbeg is someone everyone in their 20s needs.
Point, you say friendship is more important than romantic relationships in your 20s, or can be more important.
If friendships go to the wayside because of a romantic relationship, it can be actually quite detrimental to a person's ability to grow into a well-rounded person. It's like consuming just one media source.
Just try something. Try something and realize that just because you have invested in it to begin with doesn't mean that that's going to be the rest of your life.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that short clip of our interview with Jemma Sbeg. If you want to see the full interview, you can click right here. But more importantly, if there's anything you disagree with, please leave a comment. We reply to all comments and we want to hash it out and have a discussion because everyone learns that way. Make sure to like and subscribe as well. We got loads more content like that coming soon. See you guys next time.